2 Chronicles Chapter 29. Hezekiah assumed the throne at the age of 25, ruling for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. In contrast to his predecessor Ahaz, Hezekiah pursued a righteous path before the Lord, much like his ancestor David. In the first month of his reign's first year, he initiated the restoration of the doors of the house of the Lord, opening them to signify the beginning of repairs. He summoned the priests and Levites, assembling them in the east street, and delivered a message, urging them to sanctify themselves in the house of the Lord, their fathers' God. He implored them to remove the filthiness from the holy place, emphasizing how their forefathers had trespassed, abandoned the Lord, and defiled his dwelling. These previous generations had even sealed the doors of the temple porch, extinguished the lamps, and neglected to offer incense or burnt offerings to the God of Israel. Consequently, the Lord's wrath had befallen Judah and Jerusalem, leading to their troubles, astonishment, and disgrace, as evident to all. Hezekiah lamented that their forefathers had fallen by the sword, and their sons, daughters, and wives had been taken captive due to these transgressions. He then declared his intention to establish a covenant with the Lord God of Israel, seeking to appease his fierce wrath. Addressing his sons, Hezekiah urged them not to be negligent, emphasizing that the Lord had chosen them to serve him, minister before him, and offer incense. The Levites, in response, sanctified themselves and carried out the king's command, cleansing the house of the Lord. The priests entered the inner part of the temple to cleanse it, removing all the uncleanness from the Lord's temple into the court. The Levites then carried this uncleanness to the brook Kidron. Their purification efforts began on the first day of the first month, and by the 8th day, they reached the porch of the Lord's house, completing the sanctification in 8 days. On the 16th day of the first month, they finished the process. Hezekiah received a report that all the cleansing was complete, and the altar of burnt offering, along with its vessels, the showbread table, and its vessels, had been prepared and sanctified. Additionally, the vessels discarded by King Ahaz during his transgressions had been restored and sanctified, now lying before the Lord's altar. Hezekiah, rising early, gathered the city's leaders and ascended to the house of the Lord. They brought 7 bullocks, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 he-goats as sin offerings for the kingdom, the sanctuary, and Judah. Hezekiah instructed the priests, descendants of Aaron, to offer these sacrifices on the Lord's altar. The priests sacrificed the animals, collected the blood, and sprinkled it on the altar. They then made reconciliation with the blood, atoning for all Israel, as the king had commanded. Hezekiah placed the Levites in the house of the Lord, where they played cymbals, psalteries, and harps, following the commandment of David, Gad the king's seer, and Nathan the prophet, for such had been the Lord's commandment through his prophets. With the Levites using instruments of David and the priests blowing trumpets, Hezekiah ordered the burnt offering to begin. The moment the burnt offering started, the psalm of the Lord accompanied it through the trumpets and David's ordained instruments. The entire congregation worshipped, singers sang, and trumpeters sounded their trumpets. This celebration continued until the burnt offering was fully presented. Upon completion, the king and all those present with him bowed down in worship. Hezekiah and the city's leaders then instructed the Levites to sing praises to the Lord using the words of David and Asaph the seer. The Levites sang praises joyfully, bowing their heads in worship. Hezekiah encouraged them to bring sacrifices and thank offerings to the house of the Lord, and the congregation willingly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, each offering according to their heart's desire. The total number of burnt offerings presented by the congregation included 70 bullocks, 100 rams, and 200 lambs. Additionally, there were 600 oxen and 3,000 sheep for consecration. The priests, though outnumbered, received assistance from the Levites in flaying all the burnt offerings. The Levites demonstrated a greater determination to sanctify themselves than the priests. Burnt offerings and drink offerings for each burnt offering were in abundance. Thus, the service of the Lord's house was restored to its proper order. Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced, acknowledging that God had prepared the people for this remarkable transformation, which had occurred swiftly.